Hi, everybody.
Hi.
It's Mecha,
And Ace.
and
Happy New Year, everybody.
it is that. It is the beginning of 2025, and so to celebrate, we're doing the only rational thing possible, and we're going to talk about one of the more popular animes of 2024. That is how you.
Dun, 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 dun.
That's how you topical. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's how you do it.
Cool. This one's going to be interesting. I'm not sure quite how we're going to edit it all together, but because this is the first time that we're doing an art study on an anime, I think, right? All of our other stuff has been Western artists for the most part, at least.
Yeah, I
We've
think so.
done Gendy, we've done comic artist.
We've done Invincible. Or
Yeah.
the comic, at least.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say that's a
Yeah.
comic. I was on track.
Anyway.
Anime presents an interesting thing, but I want to do this one because it is a very there's some very unique things in this anime, I think. And part of that is just because of when it's coming out. Anime has had enough time now that it's really kind of percolated, and there's some really interesting technology going on here that people try to do and don't always work as well. But there's an inescapable thing we have to look at in anime, and you can say this about a lot of art, but anime I think is the biggest proprietor of it has its own style. It is a genre. Well, it's kind of a genre that has a style unto it. When you say anime, there are multiple genres in it. You can have horror anime, you can have superhero anime, etc., etc. But if it is an anime, it's gonna look like an anime to an extent, right?
Yes.
And again, this is dangerous to say. I feel like because I've had people say that all 3D animation looks the same. People think that animation in general is for children, but
Watch Berserk or something.
yeah, but anime does have, and it's multiple age ranges, and multiple genres, but it does have a couple things that you kind of expect. It's a very relatively standardized, I'd say.
Yes.
So when you start talking about what are the style markers of a specific anime studio or a specific manga artist, it can be interesting because I can definitely look at the art of Naruto and say that doesn't look like Bleach. But my dad will definitely say that they look the same.
Right.
So we're gonna go into that a little bit, and I got a few things. I want to give just a little bit of background though, because this is gonna be kind of the flow into the thesis, kind of. So the original Dandadan manga is by thousands. Apologies in advance for all of the horrible names and everything I'm going to give. But it's by the mangaka Yukinobu Tatsu, and he worked on multiple other manga. He's been in the industry for a while. The anime was adapted by studio Science Saru, which I did recognize a few things, which again I think will kind of flow into some of the style conversation here. But they worked on things like Devilman Crybaby. Again, talking about how animation can be perceived as for children. Devilman Crybaby definitely is not. The first episode is very much like, no, let's get into it. But they also did some quote unquote American shows like Adventure Time. They worked on a couple of episodes in Star Wars Visions, namely the Astro Boy one, as Ace and I
Oh,
called
the
it,
cute one.
and one that was called Akakiri, which I think was in season one. So a little bit of further background. Yukinobu, and this I'm not gonna go into his whole life story and everything because I'm not that kind of researcher, but I keep coming across this statement that when he was coming up with the manga for Dandadan, he was going through a bit of a burnout. He was trying out a few different ideas, and none of them were really like enticing him. And so one of his buddies basically said, "Hey, I see you're struggling. Stop worrying about all the technical. Stop worrying about sellability or any of this other stuff. Just draw what you want to draw." Because this is a guy who's been doing it for a while. It's stop worrying about other people. Draw what you want to draw. And he came up with Dandadan, which isn't so much of a visual style thing that I can get into, but I think that's very evident in the story and kind of episode by episode. It's just cool shit. um, what you dig that, Ace, or?
I kind of dig that. There was also, I don't know where I heard it, but I heard that he was also told to read over 100 shoujo manga to make sure like the romantic chemistry between Momo and Okaru
That
feels
that makes
believable.
sense because I feel like he wanted to draw monsters and stuff, and he wanted to draw monsters so much that he couldn't decide whether he wanted to do aliens or yokai. So he said, "I'm gonna do fucking everything." But if you wanted a romantic story, it's if I were to make a monster show that had romance in it, I would definitely need someone to give me some homework on romance writing. So I dig that.
And it
But
makes sense because they're idiots in love, Your Honor.
yeah, so we'll get into that's I think that's such a strong thing though of draw what you think is cool, and there's so many bits of it that like there's visual things that make sense, there's lore going on here, but so much of it just feels like it just do what you want to do. And it worked. So getting into some of the visual style that we can talk about, extremely energetic sketches, I would say. Um, which again you can say about a lot of things, but I think one of the things that makes the anime and the manga read so well is that for all the craziness that you can look at in the posing and all that, it's then immediately followed up with very clean and consistent line art. Samurai Jack, some things like, or crap, I can't actually think of an example of a show with crazy, lively line art right now. But if you have a crazy sketch and crazy line art, it produces a certain feel. If you look at most of the Dandadan stuff, which maybe I can zoom in on some of it, again, it's just very clean line art. There is no pressure sensitivity to a lot of these lines, which is a common practice for animation because, especially if you're having a slow animation, if your line goes from this to this between two frames, that you're gonna get a weird jitter, and sometimes
Yeah.
that works stylistically. But a lot of times, especially in a studio where you have to pass a project off between multiple people, you're gonna want to just keep things a little bit more chill. But I think that, like I said, the craziness of the shapes and the liveliness of the sketch combined with such a refined rendering really adds something to it. But yeah, so that's one of the biggest things that I was finding that made this kind of stand out between other anime. Let's see, what else did I put down here? I think that it also retains its manga and comic vibe with seemingly in some, at least in some shots, trying to fit everything in frame sometimes, especially the example I have down here. This dude is contorted to fit into the frame, right?
Yeah.
And it not only fitting in there, but he's filling up the entire frame almost, which contrasts something like Chainsaw Man, where there are things specifically put outside of frame. I'm thinking of the ghost hand, or the curse devil, when Ponytail pulls out his little needle and he stabs it in to affect the curse. The comic has a little finger flick the sword coming from literally off page. So that's something that kind of plays with it to burst out and become more immersive. Whereas this, it feels so much like a comic book's put straight to film by, like I said, fitting in there. Because I feel like comic artists, and Ace is where you can correct me and yell at me, but comic artists, due to how they work, they have their paneling worked out ahead of time often, right?
Yeah.
So when you're drawing literally like, okay, I have my box here. I need character 1 to be up here, and you're trying to fill up that frame, and then character 2 over here, which produces, I think, a certain vibe. Whereas animation, for many, many years, has been working on, I mean, now digitally, obviously, we have an infinite canvas, but oftentimes, if you look at a lot of old animation paper, you'd have a marked out working area and then a larger within smaller paper.
Yeah.
So you'd have literally someone drawing an entire character, but only having, only some of it on screen. And you'd have a lot more cutoff. And I think, again, part
Right.
of this is because you have a moving camera, so you're going to zoom in, zoom out. And that's just a very interesting vibe, and that they do this a lot. Like, not even just this one. We have this one up here, and you can call out, yeah, his foot's off screen in this, but like, it's so efficiently, like, from corner to freaking corner is filled up. All of this is effectively a filled frame. You only have like 10% negative space left here.
That makes sense.
Which again, I think is a very comic attitude of it. Which is not a diss or anything. It's just something I noticed. Do you have a hot take on that, Ace? Or
No, I don't think so, honestly.
you think I'm hitting the mark, or am I going to get angry comic artists in the comments?
I think you might have hit the mark.
Cool. Next one is just its use of communicating tone using monochrome. So again, two of the most pure Dandadan shots that I could pull from Google Images. You can see a black and white image with the little bit of red coming from the hair, and then another one where it's all redded out, which contrasts with very normal scenes where our characters are still in a lively color palette. ISA is was it a Gyaru?
Yes.
Okay, Gyaru Gal or whatever, where she is obviously very fashion forward, so she's going to dress up in bright colors. But the scenes are mostly very normal. You have green for nature, a desaturated classroom environment, stuff like that. But then when crap hits the fan, we go into immediate hyper stylized monochrome settings a lot of time.
Yeah, I kind of interpreted that as like a whole separate world.
Yeah, and that's
Like alternate world.
they have a lot of that thing where it's like, oh, the aliens attack and they're making a temporal field for us to have our fight in or whatever, which is a very just anime thing of like, we're just going through our day, boom, Yu-Gi-Oh style duel thing going on.
Except for like the one scene with the anatomy statue.
Yes, but and even then, like the ghosts when they're being chased by Turbo Granny, they're in normal like Japan, but you'll see a lot of that stylized color come in to just kind of bump into a certain tone. Which again, a lot of these are not crazy like super secret techniques, but I think they do it really well. And to follow that up, you know, it may be monochrome, but you can still see a lot of what I think of as very hyper contrast, which will bring into the narrative side of things. I have some narrative points I want to make, but the monsters obviously become more stylized and textured when you put it next to the quote unquote normal human characters, which again is just a nice piece of visual language to say, just to get into your head, oh, this is weird, this is different. Momo's clothing has the fold wrinkles, but there's not a lot of texture work on a lot of her. Whereas things like Okarune's monster form, Turbo Granny, the sumo here, they're just covered in hatch work or contour lines. And I think that is a great little way. And it's not overcomplicated because most of the human and normal world doesn't have a lot of texture.
And you meant like Turbo Granny, like before she became like the porcelain cat, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's one of the things. Like Turbo Grit, when she gets the quote unquote safer form, it's a smoother design, which just helps to tell your brain so quickly, kind of what you're dealing with. Let's see here. I think that so that's my visual style. Any tidbits you want to throw before we get into my commentary on the narratives?
No, not that I think.
Okay. Yoink. Narrative and vibe. That's my thing. Narrative and vibe.
Oof.
So again, dude is just drawing cool stuff. We went over this, and I just think that's such a strong thesis. If you think it's cool, go ahead and do it.
The tonal whiplash works really well here, I'd say.
and that's definitely a thing that I'm gonna be jumping on.
Yeah.
It also has a very, in my opinion, a very Japanese, very classically Japanese anime fusion of the regular and the extraordinary. These are stories that you can see across most of the globe in entertainment and storytelling, but anime specifically has this obsession, seemingly, with we're gonna have high schoolers become superheroes, demon slayers, Power Rangers, get transported to another world, and they're constantly making sure you remember, oh, I was just a kid at the top of my class, or I was a kid that got made fun of, and now I have a demon sword. Whoa! And I think Dandadan is one of those ones that does that really, really well.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that may be because like you have Isa and Okaroon, who are very different sides of the socio-political spectrum in high school, of one being a cast out nerd, the other being this kind of cocky girly girl, quote unquote, very,
Yeah.
obsessed with normal, quote unquote, normal girl things, whatever that actually means, but stereotypical nonsense. And again, I think Japan just does that really well, and part of it is because a lot of Asia, I think, has their mythology baked into their culture in such interesting ways with things like Kappa, Shinto, yokai, and like a lot of Asian cultures, ghost stories or ghosts originate from just we should bury them and be respectful, and if you don't, yeah, they're gonna be angry. You have, I can't remember what the name is, but it's a type of yokai, I believe, where if you leave a possession unattended for long enough, it will develop its own desires. So the idea that I
Mm-hmm.
can have an umbrella just sitting in the corner for too long and it's gonna be weird, which is a very childish thing. You go to grandma's and you see this one thing hanging up in the ceiling every time. Your brain starts to come up with something about that.
Yeah.
But also a lot of their folklore isn't like purely evil. If I ask you about the folklore of West Virginia or even in England, I think most ghost stories are gonna be don't mess with the ghost because the ghost will kill you. The
Mm-hmm.
Mothman, no one thinks is an. I mean, we have anime girl Mothman now, but no one thinks the Mothman is a nice guy. We're all scared
Yeah.
of the Mothman. Aliens, we're assuming are bad. But over in the east, you have a lot more critters that are benevolent. Even Ireland. The Fae. You want to stay away from them. You don't want to mess with them, but you can be respectful and coexist with them. Uh, and there's not a lot of nice yokai necessarily in Dandadan, but I think that's one of the things that makes Dandadan feel like one of the quintessential anime of 2024 because it's these things that all anime fans are kind of trained to want. To see the crazy right next to the irregular, but just out of sight.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which also gets into energetic, strong emotion. Again, very anime things. Any anime protagonist you can think of is gonna, one of their defining traits is gonna be never giving up, just hammering straight in there. And this is kind of more an animation cue too, but everything that any character does, they do it shouting. Uh, if when they're begging hot grandma for new school uniforms, they don't just go, "Hey, we kind of need new school uniforms." It's everyone slams to the ground in a very formal bow, like,
Yeah.
"Please get us new
Which,
uniforms."
like, all of those strong emotions add to the tonal whiplash of the
Mhm.
show. But when you get to, like, the very serious moments, they are treated seriously.
Yeah, 100%.
They're made to make you feel those emotions with the characters.
And that is 100% a thing. Again, everything, which, and again, this goes right back to, I think, just wanting to do cool stuff. Every idea that is put forth in the anime is put forth so genuinely, and it's like they never in the pitch room they never stop asking how can we make this more. But just everything about it, everything is, oh, what's Okarune's big like yokai power? He runs fast. So every shot of him, every time he's doing something, every bit of the animation is how can we make this feel faster? How can we make this feel faster? Which again, very Japanese anime thing. This is, they are masters of effectively a still frame looking like it's going at the speed of sound.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe, yeah, that those are the majority of my little points. Feel free to comment anything you like if you want to share some of your own Dandadan fan art. I do have some stuff I'm working on, like I said, but I don't know if it's good or worth posting. So maybe y'all will have some feedback to throw our way. But until we meet again, this is the new Mecha and the new Ace and the new year. And yeah, we'll see you later.
Bye.